My name is Dan. I'm president of a local company called Radiant Returns. I have an 18-year technology background. Graham and I actually worked together at Microsoft for, I was there for 8 years, he was there for much longer. So essentially, there are two programs. There's microfit, which is programs that are 10 kilowatts or less, and then there's fit, which is over 10 kilowatts. We've kind of taken a guess here that most people who are coming are looking at doing this either at their residence, their farm, or maybe on a small building where you might have a business. So we're focusing exclusively on microfit. There are a lot of similarities to the program, in fact more similarities than dissimilarities. But just so you know, I'm going to choose to sort of ignore the fit program, although we can take questions on that afterwards. So really this is targeted to get basically the consumer into the green energy market. You own all equipment. In this case, typically with microfit, you would go ahead and buy the equipment through a loan, through your savings, however you want to get the money. You would hire somebody to install it. You would get it connected. You'd be given the contract. Basically, you'd get it insured. And then when you're connected, you're actually guaranteed a rate that'll be paid out to you over a 20-year period. And I'll get into some details on that. Typically, the government created this program. Specifically, they created the rates to try to generate an attractive 11% return year over year for 20 years, which is great. If you can get 11% for 20 years, that's way better than any investment I have in my RRSPs. If you're doing better than that, please give me the name and number of your financial advisor. So that's one of the reasons why I have a system on my house, but I also it was something that was important for me to do. That 11 to 15% return is most directly impacted by the cost of the system. So, if you can get a system, a 10 kilowatt system for $70,000 and it performs well, the same as a system that would cost you $80,000, you'll obviously have a much sooner payback and a higher return on investment. So who's eligible? The government actually specifies who can participate in microfit because they're trying to keep out big business from taking advantage of the premium rates. Microfit pays the highest rates relative to the FIT program. They pay the highest rates because they want to enable individuals to be able to afford to get a good payback and be able to afford getting into a program like this. So by the OPA's definition, all of us in the room, as long as we're residents of Ontario, are considered individuals. Ken will take you through the application process, but you actually do identify the legal applicant, and that legal applicant is the one bound to the contract with the Ontario Power Authority. Farmers are eligible, renewable energy cooperatives, but you have to be registered under the province of Ontario as a renewable energy cooperative. Municipalities can participate. Your local utility companies like Horizon could participate in this and put in a number of small microfit generating stations. Named universities and colleges, and there is actually a list that specifies them. Hospital and long-term care facilities, Aboriginal communities, and they do get some additional price adders, they're called, some additional financial incentives. Social housing, affordable housing, and also faith-based organizations, and there are a number of churches in Hamilton that have either already done solar PV microfits or are in the process of doing them. So just to give you a sense of the scale, this program was launched in October 2009, and we've got over 22,000 applicants already in the system. Needless to say, the OPA has been overwhelmed with applications, and what was supposed to be a 30-day turnaround to applications is taking, in all of my applicant cases, over 3 months. And because the majority of my client applications aren't approved yet, I can't even tell you how long it's really going to take. I really encourage anyone who's serious about doing this to go home and do their application today, because the rate that you get from the government is guaranteed at the time that this is where it gets tricky. The OPA has set a precedent by coming out early and reducing rates for ground mount systems. That took everybody by surprise because the program was less than a year old at that point. And it was only after the industry lobbied and really complained to the OPA that they allowed people who applied by a certain date to be grandfathered to get the old rate. So, the main lesson out of all of that is no matter when you're thinking of doing the project, you have a year from the time you get approved to actually implement your system. Apply now, because that gives you the greatest chance of being secured the current rates today, which I'll take you through. Interesting to note is there have been less than 10% of the total applications have actually been confirmed as contracts. One can only speculate as to why that is. My own personal belief is that a lot of people speculated and applied and didn't necessarily have the intent to proceed. Others are simply waiting because you do have a year window They're simply waiting to get their system installed. And I don't know, does anybody want to provide any anecdotal information on why that number may be so low? No? But that's good news, I think, because it means that as they continue to process applications, if they're using the number of actual contracts executed as the measure by which they'll deem the program to be full, there's still lots of room. This is just an article I found online. It just talks about the rate cut to the ground mounts. Again, just to serve as a warning that don't sit on your hands. Please get your application in right away. It's free, and that gives you at least a good chance of being guaranteed a good rate. So what are the rates? This is just a segment of the greater list. So there are rates for wind power, there are rates for gas and biomass and hydroelectric, and since we're focusing on solar here, the government essentially looks at solar as being solar electric or solar PV as being divided into two types of technologies. Although the panels and the inverters are the same, if it's on the roof, it's considered one type of technology, and if it's on the ground, it's considered another type of technology. So you can do one of either of these two on a single property, right? So you can do either a roof mount or a ground mount. The government doesn't like to see you combine the two. The roof mount pays the highest. Again, the government is trying to generate, they're polling the industry to look at average costs, is what they say. I would really dispute the numbers that they come up with. But they're trying to generate an 11% return, and they're saying that ground mounts are a lot less expensive to do. In general, that is true. I would dispute the difference here in terms of the rates, and they'd actually proposed a much lower rate than the 64.2 cents, but this is what they came back with after a lot of kicking and screaming. So the best rate is the rooftop. If you're doing this on a house with a sloped roof, it's actually a really simple installation. As Graham mentioned, it's usually between about $70,000 and $80,000 to do 10 kilowatts if you have the room, 1,000 square feet of roof to do that. Otherwise, you're looking at 1 kilowatt for every 100 square feet you have of south-facing roof. And there's one key rule you have to look at, and this has caused major ripples in the industry, and that is that this is a job creation program, and so the government wants to ensure that a significant portion of the materials used in your project are, to some degree, made in Ontario. Right now, there's only one company that's been around since prior to this program assembling panels in Ontario, a company called Solgate. Since then, there have been at least 6 or 7 companies that have announced that they're setting up module assembly plants in Ontario. And if you look at this grid here, you actually, this is really important when you talk to your vendors, because when your application finally gets confirmed, you need to be able to prove to them what percentage of domestic Ontario content your system contains. If you can't prove this, in other words, if you can't articulate that the inverters are assembled in Ontario, that the racking is made in Ontario, that the silicon in the panels was refined in Ontario, you won't be able to say for sure what percentage of Ontario content you have. And basically, if you haven't applied, just by show of hands, how many people have already applied to the microfit program? 3 people. Okay. So for the other 99% of you in the room today, you will need to purchase a system that is a minimum 60% domestic content. This grid is up on the Ontario Power Authority's microfit website. But generally speaking, all racking systems on the market today are made in Ontario. The aluminum is extruded in Ontario. Your labor is generally local providers. There are tons of inverters on the market today that have some level of assembly in Ontario. The one area that there's still a lot of catching up to do is a significant area, and that's in the panels. And the easiest way to meet this requirement is to get a panel that's assembled in Ontario. There are some foreign panels, I believe Sharp is one of them, where they're using silicon that was refined in Ontario, but being manufactured outside of the province and then shipped back in. But in that way, they're able to meet the domestic content. So that's the key crux of your conversation there, is talk to your vendor about how they're meeting the domestic content requirements. Now I'm going to hand things over to Ken, and I'll be back up again to talk about the tax programs, but Ken's going to show you exactly how to participate in the program.
Excellent. 3 people. 3 people in the room so far that have, oh, sorry, let me get on the mic here. There we are. So 3 individuals in here that have an application in. I'm really pleased to see everyone here then to learn a little bit more about the program. There are opportunities out there for most individuals, rooftop, ground mount. From some of us in the room, because actually that was one of the questions I was going to ask when I first came up here, is how many people had already applied. And out of that number, I was going to pare it down to maybe who already had a system in the room, and maybe some of those folks are out here or whatever. But I know there's a few in here, like I know Dan's in, Graham, you're in. I'm a bit of an old timer, I guess, on this kind of stuff, and I was doing it when it wasn't really cool, and my neighbors kind of looked at me and thought I was really weird, and because back in 2004, I put in a bunch of solar panels in the backyard and a small wind turbine. And I put it in on what's called a net metered basis. So we use that system to reduce the power on our house. And what are we net metering at? What our current LDC rate is, how much we're paying on our utility bill. We produce about half of what we use. We don't use a lot. It's a small farm. It's also 2 residences in there. We have a mother-in-law suite with us, so there's 2 washers, dryers, 2 fridges, a whole bunch of freezers, because it is a farm. And we have a boiler, so we have circulation pumps for kind of circulating the power around, and some pump, the springtime kind of stuff. But it does about half of what we need. So and the rest we've done through energy conservation. Anybody that's talking about, and this is not about using the power today, this is about selling the power through microfit. But from your own personal side, and I always have to put the plug out there, conservation, reduce, reuse, recycle. The reduce side of it applies in your house no matter whether you're participating in microfit or not. So we spent all the time to reduce all of our loads and then try to replace as much as we could. We knew smart meters were coming. We were going to time shift our stuff and get everything right down to nothing. So here we are 7 years later, and we have our microfit, 10 kilowatt microfit in the backyard. And it's kind of funny, actually. I think the ESA folks are really kind of starting to look at us and say, you guys are really strange. Because when they first showed up back in 2004, not many, it took us 4 ESA inspectors before we had one that understood what embedded generation was, microgeneration. And a fellow that came out of the Simcoe area. So finally he come down and says, oh yeah, I know what this stuff is, and click. And then when we had our microfit project go live, and now there's 2 meters. So you have a meter that records your generation, and you have another meter that is your load for your house. Graham had that in his presentation, showing how the air was flowed. So when we had the ESA inspector there to approve the microfit application, he looked at it and he says, well, I don't know here. He says, on that load meter, he says, you got a sticker that says dual use, 2 systems, parallel systems. And he says, you're not allowed to use the power from your microfit for your house. And I said, well, that's because we have a separate solar and wind system. So this one is net metered and this one we sell on. Oh, so anyhow, lots of confusion, but I'm glad to see there's a number of us in here breaking grounds. And the folks that are here today, you've taken a Sunday afternoon out of your schedule. We really appreciate it. And our job here is to help you today. So my stage of this is the application process for those that have been through it. It's not overly scary, but there's a couple of things in there that you need to be aware of as you apply. It'll make your life a lot simpler as you go through the process. There's a lot of qualified individuals in the room and out here that can help you out with that. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of it today to see what it's all about. Dan had earlier the microfit website, gave you the web address. So one of those is you can register. So you have to do 2 things. First thing is you register an account with the OPA. And within that account, you're going to apply for an application. You could apply for 1 per property. You could have multiple properties and apply for multiple applications. So in this first stage, you're actually going to register. You're going to register an account with the OPA. There's 3 steps in here. And as you can see, the first 2 are all about education, learning about the program, learning how to register, some little PDF documents you can look at online. The last one is getting actually into the registration. So in this